Today's discussion will be presented in 3 sections since we are recording it for radio broadcast on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. You're welcome to post questions and comments during the session, and we'll try to answer them online. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Tom Temin, host of The Federal Drive on Federal News Radio.
Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guests today are Greg Judge. He's the Deputy Director for Operations and Architecture at the CIO G6 for the U.S. Army. Andre Mendez is CIO of the International Trade Administration at the Commerce Department. Troy Massey is Director of Enterprise Engagements at Iron Bow Technologies. And Brandon Lockhart is Director of Data Analytics at Iron Bow Technologies. And our topic today, gentlemen, thank you for being with us, is hybrid cloud. This is the word for federal agencies, and everyone is going to have a hybrid cloud architecture of some type. So what I'd like to do is get a sense of where you are today in the cloud journey. And we know there's a lot going on in the Army. So we'll start with you, Greg, and give us the rundown of where things look and where you're headed.
Certainly, thanks, Tom. So first and foremost, as you know, that cloud technologies are a critical enabler for not only the Army, but the Department of Defense as a whole. So what we've been taking on at the Army is a very focused effort to understand what our legacy IT inventory really looks like today. And we've already rationalized that down to a set of applications that we intend to begin rationalizing and categorizing, and then an accelerated migration to both commercial clouds as well as potentially Army enterprise data centers. As you mentioned, the hybrid cloud approach will mean from the Army that we will have some applications that are still in Army data centers because of mission requirements, but we believe the predominance of our business applications in particular really are suitable for commercial cloud architectures, and that's really where we're focusing our efforts. So we will be funding these migrations in an accelerated fashion. So we will assist the portfolio managers and the functional mission owners to begin to refactor where needed and actually migrate those applications within the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, so the real heavy lift then is understanding your applications almost more than your hardware.
Exactly. So we've been working this task for well about a year now to really get a firm understanding of what an application really does look like, and can we move it to a cloud provider quickly, or do we need to re-engineer that application?
And we're going to get deeper into applications as we go in, but I want to hear from Andre. International Trade Administration, part of Commerce, and so you've got your own issues, but you've also got commerce issues by being part of a big federated department. So what's going on?
Indeed. Well, actually, we are 100% on the cloud as we speak. We have a mix of software as a service and infrastructure as a service set of providers, but the individual that was there prior to me actually made the decision to actually migrate everything lock, stock, and barrel into an infrastructure as a service environment, except for the applications that were already being provided as software as a service. So effectively 100% cloud-based, and now we're in the process of migrating the legacy applications from the infrastructure as a service into the software as a service as fast as we can. We have already the plan in place for finishing up by December of 2020, at which point we will be both 100% cloud-based and 100% legacy-free based. And that has been a very, very interesting proposition. It has allowed us to dramatically cut our costs of operation, where ITA right now is spending about 12% of his budget on the IT environment, versus the typical bureau within Commerce that is operating at about 30%. We expect by the time that 2020 comes about and we finish the legacy migrations, we'll be operating at about 10% of bureau budget for IT expenditures.
But what about the applications that you might share with Commerce or other commerce agencies? I don't know, I'm just guessing, but finance or HR, those kinds of things.
All of those are actually accessed by us as cloud-based environments, so they make no difference to us. As long as we do not have to run any of the hardware associated with these environments, we really don't care. But fortunately, Commerce has been relatively aggressive in some of the applications that it hosts. For example, like timekeeping, for example. and some of the benefits packages. The financial services is still run by one of our bureaus, but as far as we're concerned, it's completely accessed via the internet, regardless of where you are in the world, and we are worldwide, so it makes no difference to us.
Right, so in that sense, technically you're hybrid because you are using some resources
absolutely.
that are in a commerce data center, a private cloud, if you will.
That is correct.
But it's not something the ITA owns and operates.
That is correct.
You have no raised floors unless they're giving a speech.
They are all gone, that's right, except for the proverbial speech. You're absolutely right.
Good.
Or this one, yeah.
Yeah, right. And Troy, at Iron Bow, you've kind of got a view across the government, and
Yeah.
we've heard really two extremes here.
Yeah, absolutely.
What does it look like on average, or what do you see as the state of the art?
So, first of all, Andre, wow, you guys are light years ahead of most. Greg is right in the middle of what we're seeing across the industry, and that's, hey, we've got this traditional data center, we've got applications in this data center, we want to go to the cloud, but how? And there's also but should we? So Greg mentioned applications. So there's an application evaluation that needs to happen on whether or not an application actually should be up in a public cloud or not. And that has to do with how chatty that application is. So there's an analytics behind the should we or should we not per application. The idea that we have this traditional data center, this physical being, and we have to get to a public cloud, and there's a large gap between that. So Greg also mentioned the migration path. There's a lot that goes on to get that ease of transition from a traditional data center to a public cloud.
Yeah, okay, so in addition to rationalizing applications, you also have to rationalize the ones that are left over to
Absolutely.
see where they best belong and how to best deal with them.
Right, and both Greg and Andre mentioned the legacy applications, and that's the trick. Legacy applications usually mean legacy hardware. Legacy hardware usually doesn't mean upgradable hardware. So you got to be able to put those applications somewhere also. So therein has the conversation of the private cloud.
Okay, and Andre?
Yeah, so it's an interesting concept because the model that we've tried to apply both at my previous agency and at this agency was really a four-step process for getting entirely into the cloud. You do a consolidation, you do a virtualization, you do a colocation, and you do a cloud. And sometimes in these type of environments, you actually go from step 1 to step 4 immediately and bypass all of the other steps. Such was the case, for example, with Office 365, where my previous agency was the first one to deploy it, and we went straight from an on-prem legacy email application that was totally and completely obsolete. And we went straight into Office 365 with everything that it offered at the time, including SharePoint, OneDrive, and everything else, voice over IP, teleconferencing, the whole thing. And that was a remarkable leap for the agency, both in terms of functionality and also in terms of cost savings and getting rid of all of the legacy environments that we had. And so, that four-stage process that I mentioned is to a large degree, I think, what a lot of people are going through. Because it makes sense. It's all the natural evolution of IT, including the virtualization paradigm that was so popular, and that actually is extremely useful in terms of enabling virtual machine migrations to the cloud in a very expeditious way.
Sure, yeah, and we'll pick more at that deeper as we get into this discussion some more. I want to ask Brandon, your title, Data Analytics Chief, implies that there's something data analytical related in this whole migration.
Well, yeah, the big challenge, as been alluded to before, is understanding where your loads are, your workloads, and being able to do cost control, analysis, being able to have an introspective view as to what's going on behind the scenes in the application to see if it makes sense. The cloud, really is about the elasticity. It's about on demand. It's about being able to scale. It's about microsegmentation and security. And so when you look at data analytics, kind of tying into each of those pieces, cloud and data analytics kind of go hand in hand.
Okay, Greg?
So I just wanted to make a point on top of what Brandon just said, because that was really important, that many people don't understand that you're just not going to move an inventory of applications to a commercial cloud. It really depends upon how you move them, particularly in a multi-cloud environment where you may have applications in one vendor location and applications in another vendor location that are dependent upon one another. Your performance that you expect from the cloud will very likely actually degrade. And so we've been running some types of analytics, like Brendan mentioned, to try to understand exactly what are the dependencies between applications so that we can actually smartly move them to a proper location and actually get the enhanced performance, elasticity, and the things that we're looking for.
Yeah, and that brings up a point I wanted to ask you also about, and that is, as these different big name commercial cloud providers compete with one another, in a sense they're offering proprietary products because they have different architectures, they have different levels of services, different types of services, and so to some degree you need a way of, normalizing or abstracting that interface between what you have and what they have so that you can be cloud portable and not be vendor locked in. And Troy, what are some of the techniques for doing that and understanding what it is you're really buying if you don't go direct?
Absolutely. Let's explain a little bit of difference between a hybrid cloud and multi-cloud. For one, hybrid cloud is the ability to take that private cloud, that local cloud, and be able to move workloads, applications, from that local cloud to a public cloud, right? So private to public. The problem with that is that industry is finding is not everybody is satisfied with where they put it, whether it be for performance reasons, like Greg mentioned, or whether it be for cost, like we've been talking about. So the idea to bring it back down or to place it to another cloud, to not have vendor lock-in with a particular private cloud or public cloud is key. So multi-cloud brings you with the ability to go from one public cloud to another public cloud, or from one private cloud to another private cloud, or any mixture of that combination. It allows for greater expandability, greater leverage, and a lot of our customers are finding that as they move stuff to the cloud, they're losing control. It helps gain that control back.
I think there are some early adopters among federal agencies that do have that arrow in their back.
Absolutely.
It's kind of a one-way migration, or else you've got yourself into an expensive situation.
Yeah.
Okay.
So ITA, when it first did its migration to the cloud, by moving virtual machines, sort of lock, stock, and barrel for legacy applications, actually ran into some of those issues from a throughput standpoint. The routings and everything else became quite convoluted, especially because we were operating on a global basis. So it took a little bit of pain over a period of time to get there. I often wonder, whether the advantage is in doing something like that and experiencing pain for 3 months, or taking 5 years to do it. And quite honestly, at this point, I don't know what the right answer is. I'm particularly pleased that I wasn't the one that was experiencing the pain, that my predecessor did that, and I was able to benefit from that. But quite honestly, I mean, not being facetious, it's an interesting proposition because the economic gains are substantial, right? And so yes, you do suffer through some degree of disruption, but if you can manage that and you have some degree of warning to your upper management, to your overall team that there is some disruption ahead, but please bear with us and we'll get there. It might be an interesting proposition. It depends on your appetite for risk and your appetite for that type of negotiation and your current budget situation. If you're in a crunch, sometimes you got to take some of the pain.
Yeah, so there is some upfront cost in getting to that greater cost savings long term, sounds like. And Troy, I just wanted to make sure we understand exactly what you were meaning by hybrid versus multi. Multi sounds like a superset of hybrid in that you could still have a private government cloud aside from your own data center, but multiple public clouds, multiple commercial clouds.
And multiple private clouds. Mm-hmm. So in the traditional military sense of a base-to-base, two clouds, you could literally bring workloads from one base to another base, or from that base to a public cloud.
And so it seems also, reading between the lines of what we've been saying so far, virtualization is a big fundamental piece of all of this. And virtualization has been around for quite a while as people sought to just get greater efficiency in their own data centers and also maybe have some kind of a distribution advantage of localizing the hosting for performance purposes, and that's partly what led to the virtualization revolution. Is the current state of the art in virtualization technology sufficient to give that cloud commercial, let's say, or whatever, cloud-to-cloud portability that people feel they need to have that control?
I would venture to say that it's pretty close. We are currently migrating from one provider, which was our preferred provider to start with. At the time, they were a little more robust and mature in their architecture, to another provider that is coming on very strong and with a better price model for us, for our needs. And we found that containerization and that virtualization really has very much helped. A lot of the tools from the two main providers of virtualization really have become so sophisticated that it's really incredible. It is almost mind-boggling. I mean, I've been in the business since 1981, and I never cease to be amazed at what can be accomplished today. Although, the VM370 engine from IBM used to do some fantastic things back then as well, at the risk of dating myself. But those technologies have become extraordinary in their ability to move these things now on a sort of, geographically abstracted manner. By virtue of TCP/IP, and so it's quite much easier than it used to be.
So the basketball drops through any hoop that you want to drop it through once it's perfectly formed.
Yeah.
And it's the technology is there now to have that automated or manual load balancing or whatever other reason that needs a workload to move from one to the other. The virtualization technology is definitely there now.
And we're going to get into more about automation, but on that note, we're going to take a short break. This is a panel discussion, Best Practices for Hybrid Cloud in Government, sponsored by Ironbow here on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network.